Hey friends, Peggy Hall back with you from thehealthyamerican.org. Do you remember back the original 9/11? What were you doing on that date? Let me know if you remember it. And I'm going to share with you in this video my own personal story of what I went through and an interesting connection that it has with Morocco. So a lot of things don't add up about that story. I have to be rather delicate and sensitive on this channel because YouTube does have a policy whereby you cannot question any mass event. That's right. I went through their education program, their re-education program, but we can speak about the facts as they were shown to us. And that's what I'm going to do in this video. I'm not really going to be breaking down and doing an entire expose. It's more about what I went through and some of the ahas that I had, but I would love for you to leave for me in a comment the ahas that you've had. And for many people, they would point to 9/11 and say that this was a wake-up call for them. And that was one of the turning points that got them going down the rabbit holes and questioning a lot of what was being shown on the news. Remember, back then, there was no YouTube, there was no Facebook, there was no Instagram, there was no Telegram. And so getting the information out was getting out the, how do I put it, orchestrated information was quite easy because all you could go by was what you saw on TV. Now, of course, there are channels that are devoted to analyzing all of that footage. There are books that have been written, and there are a lot of people who have been sadly marginalized and taken down because they've spoken out about it. So before we do that, let me thank the sponsor of our show, and we're hopping on over to noblegoldinvestments.com. And I've been telling you about this company because I trust this company. I know the CEO. I've done interviews with him before on my show. And this information is for those of you who are concerned about safeguarding your retirement savings, especially in this world of economic uncertainty. Gold has always been a trusted source of value, providing stability for centuries through countless market cycles. So with the Gold IRA from Noble Gold Investments, you can protect your financial future with the enduring power of precious metals. And I don't want you to fall prey to the election volatility and let that erode your hard-earned nest egg. Instead, you can vote for the timeless safety of gold and silver in 2021. And for my Trump fans, you can get up to 10 of these 1-ounce silver Trump coins, or you can choose to get a 10-ounce silver American flag bar with your qualifying account. Noble Gold Investments is your partner in financial peace of mind in 2024. I'll have a link for you in the description box below, along with the disclaimer that there is always a risk of investment. There's no guarantee of any kind, but you can give them a call at 877-646-5347. Get expert advice, all of your questions answered from someone in the United States. All right, friends, on this 9/11 anniversary, I'm sharing with you what I experienced, kind of my own personal connection with 9/11, how this started getting me thinking more deeply about what we are shown on TV, although I never really watched TV, but you couldn't help but see it I'm going to give you all of those details in just a moment. Let me know if this was a turning point for you. Is this what made you wake up and start to question the narratives that were being pushed? And let me know in particular how your life has been affected in the aftermath of this. So in the upcoming video, I'm going to be talking about what happened in the airports, the Patriot Act, and then my own personal connection. I want you to stay tuned for a second video that I have for you today, which also put me in mind of making some comments about RFK Jr.'s grandfather. You know, RFK is always talking about his Kennedy DNA, and there are some pretty dismal strands of DNA in that family heritage. I'll just put it that way. And his grandfather, Joseph Kennedy, was widely disliked. He was very scandalous. And I'm going to be sharing that with you in a follow-up video. Thanks so much for being on board. Remember, you can get on my free Substack. It's basically a newsletter. You go to Substack. You go to peggyhall.substack.com. It's absolutely free for you to subscribe. For those who have upgraded to a paid subscription, then you can comment on the Substack, and you also are invited to join us. the last Saturday of every month for our own private webinar. This month, you're not going to want to miss it because I've got a healthy American, Caroline Chang, who has been going toe to toe with Bobby Kennedy. And she's going to be sharing with you her email exchanges, the websites that she's got up to help people understand what's going on in terms of keeping your body safe and giving no consent to these forced medical interventions that you don't want to participate in. Friends, I want to talk to you about my 9/11 story. Now, there are plenty of people on YouTube, on BitChute, on Rumble. There have been books that have been written about this, analyzing it, presenting information, and asking questions about things that just don't add up. That's not the deep dive that I'm going to do for you today, but I will just kind of touch on that a little bit to tell you my 9/11 story. So I lived in Morocco. I was a Peace Corps volunteer. I traveled in Morocco. I worked for a private company in Morocco. So I've spent many years there. I speak Arabic, I speak French, and I have been interested in different cultures and countries for as long as I can remember. I've traveled quite a bit, and I had a very let's just say, fascinating experience in Morocco. The Moroccans, by and large, are warm, hospitable, friendly people. There is a very long history between Morocco and the United States. Morocco was the first country to sign a treaty with the United States. So what's interesting is I had spent my, let's say, kind of early adulthood traveling quite a bit, living in Morocco. And then after I was married, I wanted to travel to Morocco with my husband. And we actually had tickets to Morocco. And those tickets were for September 16th. I actually had my bags packed. We were so excited to go. I was working at the university at the time. We cleared our calendar for our vacation. We were going to go for about 10 days. And we already had the suitcases there ready to go. That morning of 9/11, I was driving to the university and I was listening to the radio back in the days when I actually listened to the news on the radio. I still didn't watch anything on TV. It's just something that I didn't ever care for. And as I'm driving to work, I'm hearing about this incident, this event. And by the time I got to work, people were riveted and they had like TVs on. Because there was no YouTube or anything back then. So people were watching the news as it was unfolding. And I will say that I definitely was affected by the emotional overwhelm that was being presented by this incident. That is, let me just put it this way, regardless of whether things are occurring the way that we're being told, whether they are or aren't, the fact is that the news wants to elicit an emotional response. That's why I endeavor on this channel, although I do flip my lid and have rants and all of that, I do seek to be evidence-based. I like to look for the facts because facts will reveal the truth. And I like to revisit some information later after the emotional response has calmed down just a bit. Having said that, this is not the day that I'm doing a deep dive on what happened, but I am going to give you the deep dive on what happened to me, if that makes sense. I was caught up in the emotional overwhelm like many people. And I remember that day at work, I think people even went home and classes were probably canceled. It's a little bit of a blur to me, other than it was very distressing and people were distraught. And of course, I personally felt, oh, I can't believe it, because now I can't go to Morocco. Immediately, they were saying that all of the flights were grounded and there were not going to be any, there was not going to be any travel for several days. And all of this was coming out in the news. And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I had tickets to go. And that was only one aspect of it. Of course, I was horrified by everything that I saw. But even then, even in the midst of all of the images and all of the broadcast, I still could notice a few things that didn't add up to me. So because I don't have a TV, I went to my mom's house later that day, my mom and dad's, and I watched some of the news coverage because it was just, it riveted everyone. And I remember my mom so clearly
and compellingly say to me, because I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. The United States was attacked. That was the, image and the, let's say, the narrative that was being pushed. And my mom said this: the United States is not a building. That really impacted me. And I know exactly what she meant. The United States is not a building. And I've done videos on this channel before about the spirit of what it means to be an American. And I'm not talking about, having a passport, or it's the American spirit of freedom and stick-to-itiveness and self-responsibility and all of those things that make America and being an American what that is to me. So I hope that I will try to link those videos to you. And that actually helped me put my feet back on the ground, that planes going into a building, if you really think that's what happened, taking down the buildings could not take down the United States. However, what happened after that was the unfortunate fast tracking of the demise of our freedom, because the Patriot Act, which is the exact, it should be called the Slavery Act. Notice that what they call these laws and these bills in Congress are the exact opposite. Like the Inflation Reduction Act actually increased inflation, and the Affordable Care Act for healthcare actually made everybody's premiums go up. I couldn't even afford health insurance after that. And I didn't used to have a deductible, and I did. And that's why I no longer have health insurance. I have a Christian health share ministry, and I've done videos on that in the past. It's called Samaritan Ministries, if you're interested. So the Patriot Act is what caused you to be groped at the airport. That's what caused you to have to take your shoes off and to be subjected to these, I call them cancer screening boxes at the airport. All of that happened after the Patriot Act. Try to get a new bank account, and you'll see the paperwork that's required for that. And several other illegal, illegitimate, unconstitutional measures were carried out under the name of the Patriot Act, because the government wanted to keep you safe from these bad guys that took over a plane with box cutters. Okay. Even back then, I was like, wait a minute, you mean, I thought it was something else, like they must have some giant box cutters or whatever. It's like, you have to be careful on this channel, because they will, they're not going to like what I have to say about that. But just think about that in and of itself. Like, that's a lethal weapon. I mean, some of these things just didn't add up. So as I'm at my mom's house and I'm watching the news unfold, and this, again, it may have been over a period of days, I can't remember exactly, but the overall feeling I got was one of questioning, like, wow, some of this doesn't add up to me. There were 2 planes, but 3 buildings went down, and so many other things that many people have covered at great length. They've studied it. I'm just here to pose a few questions. But the one thing that really got me was, and maybe you remember this, somehow in all that destruction, everything, buildings that just collapsed, that many people said looked like it was a controlled demolition, right? They just fell as if they were taking down some big hotel in Las Vegas. You can watch videos like that to see what I'm talking about. They were able to find the passports intact of the bad guys. Like, wow, that's amazing. Isn't that amazing? Out of all of the destruction, and they knew that those were the bad guys, that the passports that were found actually belonged to the bad guys. All right. So that really kicked off a lot of my questioning, everything that I was being shown. And again, I don't even watch TV. I didn't care for it. I didn't like to watch the news, but you can't help but see it, right? You're at a restaurant, they've got the news playing. You go to get your nails done, they've got the news on. You go to the gym, the news is on. So you can't help but see it. And thank goodness more and more and more people have seen it, and they are exposing these questions and these things. But the point for me is that I ended up not going to Morocco because of that, everything being closed down. And then in the subsequent months and years after that, I just could not believe, and I know many people stopped flying because of it. I could not believe how our rights were violated. There were so many videos, just like there were videos a couple of years ago of people that were breathing oxygen, that were being tackled and arrested. Back in the day, if you remember, again, YouTube wasn't really, I don't think it was around in 2001. I don't think it came on the scene until about 2006 or 7, something like that. Anyhow, there were somehow videos on TV or making the rounds of people being arrested and being hauled off because they were objecting to being basically, sexually assaulted just because they were trying to fly. The fact that you are wanting to get on a plane does not make you a criminal. And many people spoke out against that. And I don't think any of the lawsuits ever went anywhere because they're still doing that. I didn't want to be subjected to those cancer screeners that were emitting all sorts of radiation that were untested. And there were cancer clusters that were showing up with the TSA workers in certain airports. I didn't want to have anything to do with that. So I would opt out. And again, this is years ago. I would opt out of that, box, and they would make me go through for the secondary inspection. And so when they'd be groping me, this is what I would do. I would, one time I just repeated the Lord's Prayer out loud. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Another time I just started singing at the top of my voice, God bless America. And one time I said the Pledge of Allegiance, and I just tried to make a spectacle for the people that were walking by, seeing me being groped. And I know you could have the private rooms, but I wasn't even going to do that. I wanted people to see that my rights were being violated. Let me know if you stopped flying by plane because of that. So I barely have been flying anyway I certainly didn't fly during the suffocation days and all of that. But that is what ushered in the beginning of the end of our freedoms. And some would say it started a long time before that. It probably did, but it was blatantly fast-tracked. That also set the stage for related types of laws where if you live in a different country, that country, your bank account in that country, they are going to give that information to the IRS. All sorts of things like this, where it's just like out of bounds, but they hit it all in the idea of they didn't want any money laundering for these terrorist activities, because most of the Americans in the United States fall into that category. So the whole thing I thought was ridiculous. Of course, they're blaming the Arabs, and that, again, I don't have evidence really for that to be the case, other than they have to choose a boogeyman. Later down the line with the Osama bin Laden, they said that they ambushed him at the compound, but then in keeping with the Muslim religion, they just gave him a burial at sea. Oh yeah, because they really cared about the Muslim religion after they exterminated this boogeyman. None of that added up to me as well. But I would say for me, let me know in a comment below what the red flags were for you. The biggest thing for me was the passports. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. Box cutters, yeah, no. Later, they had like the underwear bomber. I'm surprised they didn't make people take off their underwear. They made people take off their shoes because like they had the shoe bomber. Yeah, right. Okay, how many people are on a plane? Let's just average it out between the big planes and the small, maybe 500 people on a plane. Let's say maybe 1,000. And there are so few plane accidents given how many flights are going around, going on at all times. It just seems to me that and there are people, you may even disagree with me. You may say, Peggy, whatever it takes, I want to be safe. I don't care if they make me take my underwear off. I want to be on a plane without any bad guys. Okay, well, that's your opinion. My opinion is completely different. My opinion is that I'm taking a risk to go on a plane anyway, because there's no guarantee that that flight is not going to have any problems. And why should millions of people have their rights taken away for a few hundred people that might have a plane taken over by some bad guys? Frankly, I didn't believe any of those previous jack hikings, I'll just put it that way. Over the years, I think probably a lot of those were sensationalized, maybe even staged. That's just me. I'm highly skeptical. Even if I see things with my own eyes, I want the evidence. I want to connect those clots. So that is my I think it's interesting story about my connection to 9/11. All right, friends, I just wanted to give a little bit of a kind of remote connection with 9/11. If you are interested, there are so many people that are digging into that. Just do your research. I don't even really have a direction to point you in other than there's lots of books. But even then, you need to go with a critical eye, like who wrote this? What might be their hidden reason for doing it? What else have they written? Why are they positioning that? Now, I would say one of the most stunning pieces of evidence that I saw was when Bush was in a classroom and he was reading a storybook to the children. And prior to that, and I'm sure you can find this online, the teacher had a list of vocabulary words. And the vocabulary words seemed completely unrelated. It's not like she was teaching, phonics or spelling. They were just random words. And the words were things like steal, hit. Do you guys remember that one? I'll have to find it again. And if you can put out some more of what of those vocabulary words were, when you put it together, you were like, this is really, really strange. And of course, they were filming Bush as he was reading this story, right? How about that? And somebody came and whispered in his ear, giving us, the people, an opportunity to see when Bush was alerted to this event happening. So I think that, to me, looked very staged as well. That's about all I can say on this channel before I trip the algorithm or something.